That's okay. The important part's going to start. We don't need our coffee. It's okay. We've had what we need. Hello. Good to see everyone. Welcome to our Facebook friends. And I'm happy to be here with you. My name's Amy, in case you don't know me. And hang on. Let's see here. Okay. We're all set to go. So hi, everyone. I'm just going to give you the one thing right away, because that's just what I like to do. Makes it so much easier. We know where we're going. When I step out in faith, my life begins to change. So God wants to change our life. He wants to transform us. And he needs us, wants us, desires us to step out in faith so that he can do what he does. Now in my life, some of you know me, I did not come to know God until I was much older. So I have been stepping out in faith for a while now. It is not, I don't know if it gets easier. It's messy. I cry a lot. It's scary. Thank you. It is okay. So I'll tell you a story. I'm going to open with a story. I have lots of stories. We've talked about that. When I had first come to the Lord, so I come to this little church, and I was there perhaps a year and a half, and the secretary position became open in the church. Now, this is in the very beginning of my getting to know God, and so I really didn't know anything about church. I'd been there a year and a half, but I still didn't know a whole lot, and it was pretty scary for me to apply for this job, because I was actually a bar worker. I had been a bar worker for a long time, and so I could sure count some money, but I didn't know a whole lot about Excel or computer things. But I felt like maybe I can do this. So I decided I'm going to apply for this job, and in a lot of jobs, like teachers, they sign different papers that say you will or won't do things in public. You know, they have these kinds of special questions that they make you abide by. So in a lot of Christian atmospheres, they have the same thing. And I'll just use my own language. That's not how the questions were, but it would say things like, are you a good person? I'm like, probably, I think so. This sounds good. Do you live your life according to the Bible? I'm like, most of the time. So these were really hard questions, and I really didn't know the answers, but I was like, sure, that sounds like me. I've never really hurt someone too badly. I think I'm a good person. I'm going to follow the Bible. I can do this. And so I decided to go for this job. I think I was the only bartender employed by our denomination. It's kind of a funny thing. It was hard. It was hard to do something different, because I had been doing the same thing for a long time. And I had been the same person for a long time. My worst day as a human being was pretty bad. So the day before I'm going to start the job, I was crying. I was at church, and I was going to my friends. I'm like, I don't think I can do this. I'm not going to be able to do this. But I showed up the next day, and I started work. And there was more crying, of course, and frustration, because it was hard. It was hard to be someone different. It was hard to try something new. So that was one of my first big steps to getting to know God, to try something different, to where he could work inside of me. Because when I'm scared, I run to him, and when I don't know what to do, I run to him. So that was my stepping out in faith that started a change in my own life. And we're going to kind of flip to another one of those stories in a little while. But in your bulletins, you have a card in there that's from the book of Mark. And I want to talk about a woman in the Bible. She's known as the woman who bled. It almost sounds like a movie title, but it's about a woman who bled. And it has a lot to say in it, because it's not just in one book of the Bible, it's in 3. So 3 people thought that this was important enough to be in here, not once, not twice, but 3 times. So we have this woman that bled. Now she bled for 12 years. You can look at verse 25, but she bled for 12 years and she spent all her money trying to solve the problem. Now, 12 years? That's a really long time. And any of the problems that I can medically think of, none of them are good. Cancer, all sorts of things can cause that. It's horrible. Now, this was already a really bad time to be a woman in history. This was already a bad time. And so here's this woman who's bleeding all the time. Now, she has a lot going on. She is in pain. So she's been in pain for 12 years. She's probably dehydrated. She's got all these things going on. She's fatigued. She's considered an unclean woman. So she is unclean. The culture of that time would not touch her, and she could not touch them. So she was isolated. She didn't get to hug people. She didn't get to go to people's houses, because if she touched their stuff, it would be unclean too. They had a lot of rules about cleanliness and how to be good with God. So she's unclean, she is isolated. And on the next one here, let's see here. So one of the things about bleeding all the time there, because they had a lot of rules. This is really before Jesus did the ultimate sacrifice for us. So they had all these rules to make you right with God. And so for bleeding issues, if she stopped for a while, she would have to count 7 days and then get into like what they call a mikvah bath. It's a purity bath. So that doesn't sound horrible in and of itself, but after 12 years, you were in there a lot. And you weren't in there alone. So you were also humiliated because someone had to watch you and attend the purity bath to make sure that you did it right, because they had to make sure that you're really not bleeding. So this woman is isolated, and she is alone, and she's in pain. She's humiliated. Why does she wake up? She has nothing to wake up for. She spent all her money. She's broke. If anyone's been sick, it's a lot easier when you have money, isn't it, than when you don't. That's right. So that's who she is. Alone, isolated, an outcast. Like people, we talk about COVID precautions, and we had to like put someone in another room in your house. Did anyone have to put someone in a room in your house? That doesn't compare. Like they literally had to go this far away from her. And she had to announce she was unclean. So this is who she is. So we can jump to, if you have it in front of you, it's verse 27. So the woman that bled, she comes up behind Jesus and touches his robe. And she's thinking to herself, if I can just touch him, I can be healed. But it wasn't just healing because she hurt or she was sick. I can have a life. I can live with my family again, maybe. I don't know if she was married or not married, but it wasn't just healing her body. It was her heart. It was her everyday life that she wanted healed. She wanted change. And she was desperate. And she comes up behind him and she touches his robe. But what I'm not curious about, because I think I know how this happened. How'd she touch his robe? Because in the story, Jesus, he's got crowds of people around him. He's healing people, he's doing miracles, he's traveling. The crowds of people are surrounding him, and this woman comes up and touches his robe, desperate to just touch him. But how did she do it? Because she's unclean, and she's supposed to tell people that she's unclean. So this is what I think happened. This woman, desperate, has tried everything she can do. She's probably on the last desperate attempt to meet this Jesus that she's heard about. I don't know if this is going to work. Now, remember, they had a lot of rules, like she can't touch men she doesn't know, she can't touch anyone. She has to say, hang on, I'm coming. Oh, by the way, I'm unclean. Stand back, stand back. But yet she somehow gets through the crowd to touch Jesus. So this is what I think happened. Now, do not take my costume as authentic. I don't really know about all that, but they all wore robes and different scarves. I can tell you that much. So this woman, this is what I think she did. Because someone would recognize her, right? You got to be careful. I think she went this way because no one's going to see her. And if she runs into someone, it's only my shoulder. Lord knows you can't run or rub against someone the wrong way. They'll arrest you. So I think she crawled, and it was hot, and she's crawling like she's desperate. She's going through these crowds of people like you're at a concert, and she's going to reach out for him. She's going to reach out for the last thing she knows that she can do is to touch the robes of Jesus. Because that's where she was at. She was on the ground, desperate for healing and for change. Because in the story, it doesn't say they made a way for her. They didn't say, oh, the crowds moved so the bleeding woman could come in. That's not what happened. That's not where she was. So this woman touches him. And then Jesus says, who touched me? What do you mean, who touched me? He knew. That's right, he knew. Just like in the garden when God said, where are you? He knew. Jesus knew where she was. So why did he ask for her? Because he wanted to engage with her. He wanted to be in her life. He wanted to be present in her life. She was healed because she felt it immediately, that I'm healed. She felt it. She felt the blood stop. She felt that she was healed. And he asked her, who touched me? Because he wanted her to know that I see you. And I want other people to see that I see you and that I'm in your life. Because he was on his way somewhere, but he wanted to stop, and he wanted her to know that he saw her and that it was okay, because she was scared probably. It says she was scared. Because she was an unclean, isolated, humiliated, in-pain woman who'd crawled on the ground to reach the feet of Jesus for healing and for change and for hope. And he wanted her to know that I see you, daughter, and you are healed. Jesus engages my faith every day. That is what he does. Just like that woman, she was already healed. He didn't have to stop. He didn't have to stop and turn to her, talk to her, be in her life today, and let everyone else know that he's in her life. Jesus engages my faith every day. But this was an amazing day. This wasn't any ordinary day, because Jesus was not done yet. Because we're going to jump, because this story is very unique. This woman who stepped out in faith to break the rules, to crawl to get to Jesus for healing, to step out in faith. He engages her. The story that's in 3 different other books of the Bible is also a story in a story. It's a story in a story. And so we're going to jump back to verse 22, and we're going to hear about a man named Jairus. So this man Jairus comes to Jesus because his daughter is sick and he's going to ask him to heal her. Jairus is a synagogue leader. Well, he's not like the woman, is he? That woman was an outcast. She was alone. She was broke. No, he was a spiritual leader. He was respected. He was educated. For him to be a synagogue leader, he was very well educated. Educated, respected. He had community. He had friends. Now, you guys might know or not know, but Jesus was not a popular guy back then with certain crowds of people. He was very controversial. The people that were following him were either curious about him or they were the outcasts. They were the criminals, the women, the poor, the lepers, the undesirable, the unlovelies is who was following him. But here's this synagogue leader who's respected and he's educated, and he's probably really not supposed to be talking to Jesus at all. He goes to Jesus to ask him to heal his daughter. That's a pretty big risk. What's he going to tell his co-workers at the synagogue? Everyone saw him. He didn't crawl. He did not crawl hidden. He walked to Jesus. He was seen. People knew who he was. That was going to get back somewhere. That was going to get back to the other religious leaders he was with. It was going to get back to his family, his community. So he was risking things to go up to Jesus in public to ask him to heal his daughter. So Jairus comes to Jesus. They get caught up with this woman who bled. And then, when they're on their way to Jairus' house again, they get word, don't bother coming. She's dead. It's over. You don't need to be here. She's already gone. Can you imagine Jairus? Oh man, everyone already saw me. I did all this for nothing. For nothing. I've risked my family. I've risked my place in the community for nothing. I don't even know what to do now. But Jesus says, no, have faith. And they continue on to his house. They go to Jairus' house. They get there. And the word is that she's dead. And Jesus says, no, she's not. She's sleeping. And everyone starts laughing. So here's Jesus, who just said to someone, daughter, your faith has healed you. He's being laughed at. Jairus is there, his daughter is dead, his family is there, and the crowds are laughing at him. What was Jairus and his family thinking then? I mean, his wife, maybe she didn't know that he went to get Jesus. I don't know. We don't know these things. But Jesus goes and he heals her. He says, get up. He takes the little girl's hands and tells her to get up, and she is alive again. Because that is the miracle that Jesus does. He will come when we step out in faith. That's when change happens. Because now, this leader, his whole world's been rocked. He stepped out in faith, in desperation, scared at this whole prominent life he has. And so now his whole world was rocked. He probably doesn't even know what he's going to do now. Is he going to follow Jesus? Is he going to go back to the religious leaders and say, no, guys, no, 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 he saved my daughter. He brought my daughter back from the dead. Jairus' life is now being back from the dead because Jesus has now changed his entire life. Two people in one story, a story and a story. So on another time, when you look at this part of Mark, there's so much of the heart of God in it. Because then he says, after the little girl's brought back to life, to get her something to eat. Because he cared about her every day. Because he wants to engage with us. He wants to engage our faith. So, okay. So, I told you about one story about stepping out in faith and starting a change, and we just talked about two people who stepped out to have their life changed. 3 years after that application I filled out, so I filled out that application, I became a church secretary. I probably wasn't a very good one, I'll be honest. But I'm likable, so you know. Thank you. So at this point, we're like 3 years later, I'm not very good with time. I am going to go to school again. And I am 41 or 2 at this point. I did know I would go to school someday because a few years before that, I heard God tell me I would go back to school. I was driving my car. I hear I'm going to go back to school. My life's pretty cruddy at the time. I don't know how I'm going to manage that. I got babies, daddy's stuff, and kids, and 4 bar jobs, and all sorts of things going on. And so I call somebody, hey, I'm going back to school. And she tells me, you are? Where are you going? I'm like, I don't know. She's like, when? I'm like, I don't know that either. I don't know. Just like that job. What was going to happen with that job? I didn't know then. So we rewind. We go. So I'm going to go to this school. It's going to be ministry class. It's going to be Bible classes. I'm going to ministry class because now I have the sign. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I take my first class, and it's actually a very, very hard class. It's hard for people who even went to college for Bible stuff. And remember, I'm still this messy, sloppy person who doesn't know a whole lot and doesn't talk like everyone else talks. So we get to this class, and it's really fancy with fancy words and fancy books, and I actually had blue highlights in my hair at the time. It looked pretty dope, but I didn't look like everyone else. And I sure didn't talk like everyone else. And so we start this class, and they ask everyone, why are you here? Why are you taking this class? What are your gifts? And I'm just sitting there like, oh, I don't know. So they start around the room. I'm like, start over there. So each person has a very nice ministry job. They work in churches, and they have titles like adult ministries pastor and youth pastor and other things. I didn't know what they were at the time, and they all know their spiritual gifts. And so they say things like exhortation and pastor shepherding, and then they get to me. So they get to me, and I'm like, well, I'm a secretary at my church. Oh, why are you taking this? I'm like, well, God's told me to come here to go to school, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I might just be doing ministry at McDonald's. So whatever God wants me to do, I will just be better at it for Jesus for being here. Like, this is my big answer. I'm going to be the McDonald's minister because I don't know why I'm here like everyone else. Because God's going to change my life, and he needs me to be okay not knowing where we're going. And so the teacher actually was my pastor at the time. God bless him. He said, well, Amy's gift is authenticity and not being condescending. So that's what he said, helping kind of smooth that over for the blue-haired girl in the room. No, God does amazing things. God does amazing things. Because I stepped out in faith again not that long later. Like, I step out a lot, and it is scary. It is not always easy, but I'm getting better at just closing my eyes and going. But why? He wants this because God has destined me to be transformed. He doesn't want us to be in one place. He has designed us to be transformed. He has made a plan for us that we step out, we trust him to change our lives. This is what he's destined us for transformation. Just like I was one way and then I was another. A lot of those stories are not appropriate for Facebook, but just let me assure you that you can always talk to me privately, that I was one way and then I was another. And it didn't happen overnight. I had to step out and then I had to step out. I want to really hit home when I step out in faith, my life begins to change. That is our one thing, and I want to hit that home because God meets us when we step out in faith because we can trust him and he is good. He is good and he engages our faith. And when we have to step out, I don't have that good a balance right now. When we step out, he is in the gap. He will not let you fall. He is in that gap. For me to step from here to this chair, this is the gap that he is in for us to step out into. That's what he wants for each and every one of us. To step out in faith. Because he is good. And he wants to transform us. So your homework today, because I don't know if you're a Jairus and maybe someone's going to laugh at you. Maybe you won't be invited somewhere. Maybe someone isn't going to like a decision you made. Or maybe you were like the woman that bled. Maybe stepping out in faith is crawling on the floor. How will you step out in faith because God, Jesus, is either going to shake your hand like here or is he going to lift you up? Because there's a gap between both steps. No matter where you're at, he is going to be there to change your life and to transform you. So ask yourself, where am I going to step out? I'd like us to think of that question. We'll think of that question and we'll do another song before I come back up and finish these thoughts before we leave tonight.